Welcome to Changing the Channel with Joe Garner, a show about shifting our individual and collective beliefs on what is possible for the future of humanity. As our understanding of how our reality continues to shift, we are at a point of reunification between science and spirituality. What does the world look like when we break free from the generational trauma that has kept most humans playing small for thousands of years and step into our full power as the co-creators of this reality? I always ask that you keep an open mind with this podcast. Ask yourself what resonates with my truth at this time and what does not. Respect your intuition, but see if you can get through the whole show because there might be that little nugget buried deep in the conversation that unlocks something for you. Welcome back, everyone, to Changing the Channel. I have a wonderful sister joining me today. Her name is Laura Hughes, and she is an award-winning PhD researcher and naturopathic doctor, but is not your typical academic. She's strayed from the traditional path to bridge the gap between hard data and the magic of being human, and loves helping people reach their full potential where science meets spirit. So welcome to the show, Laura. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
You are welcome. And for those at home, I'm not sure when this is going to come out, but we are filming this on January 1st, the start of 2024. So it's an exciting energy. I've felt it all morning, this kind of resurgence of that go-getter energy. So I'm excited to have this conversation and very glad that it's happening exactly when it is.
Yes, when you sent me your calendar and I saw that January 1st was available, I was like, oh, that's a no-brainer. It's just such a perfect time to set intention, like reinvigorate conversation. So totally took advantage of that.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm glad I could be that for you. So let's kind of dive in. I'm very interested. I'm always fascinated with people who go into the traditional route, who go into, you went into medical school and spent all that time getting your medical degree and going into the medical field. And then something happened, something changed for you. And you said, this isn't the right way. And you actually took the steps, you went and found a new direction. So just kind of walk us through what that journey was like for you and for people who are out there who are in this more traditional field or any traditional field. Like, what is it like to take those steps out and really follow your passion and follow what your truth really is?
Yes, it's scary. I'm not going to lie, but so worth it. And a huge part of my message whenever I talk to people is that it's never too late to reinvent yourself. And I think that's part of the magic of being human. And a lot of us kind of find ourselves on these paths that other people have put us on or that we have unconsciously gone down and think it's too late. And I just want to assure people it's never too late. So yeah, I was always that girl, like overachiever, wanted to make her parents happy, was told from a very young age that I was going to go to university. I was going to study science because that's just what I was going to do. And I did. And it was fine until it wasn't fine. So I kind of just kept going because I didn't know, like, there was definitely signs early on that it probably wasn't the right path for me. Like, I loved reading, I loved writing, I loved photography, I love art. But my dad was very much, you're not going to get a job in those fields, get your degrees as far as you can go, and then, treat those as hobbies. So kind of pushed that all aside. Found myself all the way to the end of my PhD and was very successful. Like, I'm a Capricorn rising, if you follow astrology. So, have a plan, work hard, get things done. And it was the very last, I had just handed in my PhD thesis. So I studied epidemiology and epigenetics, which I'm sure we'll get to later in the conversation, but it was in the medical school in the Netherlands. I went over to Europe to do my PhD, and it was Christmas. It was this time of year, and I got a phone call from home, and my dad was sick, and it was kind of the first time in my body that I felt something, like just a real intuitive hit that something was wrong. And I decided to come home. Long story short, my dad ended up having cancer and passed away 2 weeks later. And it really threw me for a loop because I had just spent 3.5 years studying cancer. That was my whole PhD. And as how in this day and age, with all of our advances, with all of this amazing science and medicine, does someone not even know they have cancer and then die 2 weeks later? Like, it was crazy. He had advanced kidney cancer. So in many ways, it was beautiful. It forced our family to come together really quickly, have very powerful conversation. connection with the divine when he passed. But also, I had just committed my life to this scientific path, because if you go into a PhD, essentially you're expected to do a postdoc and maybe become a professor and be on this one research track. And I said, my life is too short. I'm not passionate about this. My dad is gone now. What's the point of anything? What am I going to do with my life? And just in a few instances that we had with his medical care at one of the very best cancer hospitals in Toronto, it put a really bad taste in my mouth, for lack of a better explanation. And I know, the medical system's very overburdened, but I think we've outsourced way too much of our power to it. And I knew that I wanted to get out of research and help people more one-on-one. I thought about traditional medical school, and then just realized after that experience with him that it wasn't the way for me, that wasn't going to change anything in my life, let alone help me help other people. And stumbled across naturopathic medicine, which in Canada, I'm in Canada, and I know you're in the States, but also in the States, there's naturopathic physicians. So we're essentially primary care physicians. We're trained as primary care physicians, but instead of focusing on treating symptoms and using pharmaceuticals, we focus much more on finding the root cause of a condition, reconnecting to nature. The modalities are nutrition, movement, plants, homeopathy, acupuncture, stuff like that. So committed to 4 years of doing that after my PhD. So I was in my 30s. All my friends were buying houses, having children, and that's what made me feel crazy and scared. Because I was like, what am I doing? And went into that program very, again, with a plan. Okay, I have all this research experience, all this, background in science and cancer. So I'm going to go through naturopathic medical school and come out on the other side and help people naturally with cancer. It just seemed like the logical thing. So my brain was still very much involved in this process at this time. So logic was taking over everything, my brain over my heart. My heart was not involved at all. And the turning point for me was actually probably my second or third week in the program. There's one class called Philosophy of Naturopathic Medicine, which everyone skipped. There was maybe 10 people in the class out of 100, because everyone was in the library studying anatomy and biochemistry. But I was curious. And we had this professor who was a veterinarian, had a PhD, and was also a naturopathic doctor. And he gets up there and he starts telling the story about dolphins coming from Sirius, the galaxy Sirius. And I was sitting there. I remember texting my friend, being I don't know what I'm paying for. This is crazy. I'd never heard anything like this. And I feel safe having this conversation on this podcast just because I sense your energy. But I went home and I started looking what is Sirius? Dolphins? What? 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 And it just woke up something inside of me that there was this whole different world of energy, of dimension, of possibility, of why we're here that I'd never, ever experienced. But kind of had to stay in the closet around it because, I was this PhD coming into, blah, blah, blah. So it took probably another 3 years for me to fully come out when I was, seeing patients. And I realized that I couldn't just help them, even with the natural modalities. I couldn't help them unless we went there, unless we asked, hard questions, unless we asked about emotions and feeling and the heart and intuition. And I know that it was a little bit scary because, again, I had this conditioning for so many years that wasn't the way. That wasn't, logical. That wasn't safe. But the people who I saw truly getting better were the people who we just had powerful conversation. And then they were doing the healing. And of course, I would give them things to support them. But that's where the magic really happened. So that's kind of my trajectory into that.
Finally, a place for listeners to gather and share. Join the Ascension Update Substack for messages and updates from our brothers and sisters helping with the Ascension, articles on the future of humanity, and a Q&A where you can ask my guides anything you would like. This is the hub for everything Ascension related. Click the link in the show notes or go to joegarner.substack.com to stay at the leading edge of this movement. And now, back to the show. Yeah, that is fascinating and kind of mirroring a little bit of my trajectory. I'm maybe a year or two behind you on that trajectory, but just that feeling, I know that feeling that you're talking about where, you're learning these new things, you're experiencing these new perspectives of the reality that you thought you existed in. And you're like, this makes more sense than all the other things that I've ever believed in, but nobody else has that feeling. And
Yes.
it's basically like a remembering. You're remembering a part of yourself that you forgot before you came to, this third dimensional reality, this human body. You kind of forget all of that stuff before you come here. And now you're re-remembering, you're bringing it back into your energetic system. You're bringing it back into your neuro pathways. You're rewiring your brain essentially to have these new belief systems. And in that space, I mean, it's taken me a year to really get comfortable with who I truly am and the ideas that I'm kind of sharing with other people. But in that space, it's scary, and it's so easy just to go back to the safe route, to go back to that old you that was just go get the job, go have the kids, get the family, do the thing. And then maybe at 60, 65, you'll kind of figure out what life is really about. And it's like, no, no, no,
No.
that's not what we're here to do. This is a time of change. This is a time of evolution in the human species. So let's
Yeah.
get out and let's do that now, while also you can still do all that stuff while going through this process. It's not like you have to give everything up to, we're not in the Roman Catholic Church in the 12th century where you have to give everything up if you want to go down this spiritual path. Like, you can have all of that and be in tune with who you truly are, like what your true essence really is.
Yes, that's kind of my checkpoint, is like, how dogmatic am I being right now? Because we are humans having a human experience in like the human reality. But as you said, it's this remembering. And this professor I'm talking about, he talked about truth with a capital T. And like, that's what you're feeling, is truth with a capital T. And that's what I had to really just create safety in myself for, because I'd come from this world that's evidence-based and you need evidence and where's the clinical study? And that's kind of what's made me roll my eyes the past few years with everything kind of going on in the world with health, um, demanding evidence. And I'm like, what if there is no evidence? And what if that's okay?
Right.
What if like the human experience and how we're experiencing something is what matters? And like how you feel that is how you know.
Mhm. Yeah. And the evidence that can only be visible from the five senses. I mean, that's the evidence that the reductionist scientific perspective is looking for. There's only five senses that you can experience all of the energy, the entire spectrum of electromagnetic energy, even though it's 1% is what we're experiencing in the human physical vessel. Like, that's all you can go when you're making what you're calling your truth. And it's like, no, 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 there's way, way, way more to that. And it's a feeling, it's an energy. It has nothing to do with what what the photonic microscope is telling you. It's everything to do with what's at that lower level below what we can actually see or touch or feel or hear. Like, what is at that level. And
Mhm.
it's really exciting to me to have people like yourself that are taking this journey, that are going out and sharing their what they have come to share. And again, I think it has everything to do with where we are in this evolution in humanity, where we're going from this very limited kind of separation consciousness that we've been experiencing on the planet for so many years, and we're moving towards this more harmonious, this more awakened kind of existence within the population. And of course, just like you and I have gone through this interesting period where we're kind of like shifting our belief systems and shifting our timeline and shifting our understanding of what is really true about this reality, the collective has to go through that as well. So it's basically like the collective is going through this gigantic shift in understanding of what is possible in humanity. And there's going to be fear, there's going to be doubt, there's going to be this, scariness to it. But we have to keep, the ones that have gone through that process have to be the ones kind of leading the way and drawing people towards that truth, instead of just, hey, I figured it out, I'm good to go. So
Absolutely.
I love that you're still out there sharing it and kind of helping people along the way. And for a lot of people, I think they get a little, it's a part of the process, right? Where you feel like, I'm the only one in the world that sees and understands this. So I've got to be the one that's going to save the planet. And it's like, no, 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 no. There's several million other people out there that are all going through this. They all understand this. They all know what's going on. And with technology, we're able to get all this information out faster and faster and faster. So the more we can do that, the better that the outcome is going to be, the less imagine if you had 5 or 6 of those professors that were kind of sharing this capital T truth with you and helping you along the way. Like, we're that for everybody else. And it's really cool. And to see everybody coming together and creating new systems and these kind of new ways of doing things. It's kind of amazing to see. I look at things like Gaia television
Yes.
and stuff like that, where it's essentially teaching people about all of these ideas, and it's going from esotericism to exotericism, where it's a part of the general consciousness of the planet.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's so ironic because, as you said, you're kind of nervous, you're kind of scared as you're going through it. But I've never met anyone, maybe a few people, but like the majority of people who I talk about this with, who I think are going to judge me or who I think aren't going to get it, are actually super curious and almost relieved. And they'll come back a few months later being like, remember when we talked about, aliens, whatever. I saw this thing and then they want to talk about it. And what you're doing is you're giving other people permission to think outside the box and to start changing their mindset and change their conditioning. Because if they see someone else going first and it's safe, that's how you ripple out the effect. So
Mhm.
I think, yeah, technology kind of gets a bad rap sometimes. But as you said, how would we be connecting like this to
Right.
share with hundreds of other people if it wasn't for technology? So I think it's all happening in divine timing for sure. This
Yeah.
planetary shift. Yeah.
Exactly. And it's just like every other technology that comes out. Like, the technology comes out, the level of consciousness that humanity is at may not be at the right level just yet, but that technology allows for that raising of the consciousness. So it's almost like the whole cart before the horse thing. Like, you have to put that technology out, even though people aren't ready for it. Otherwise, they don't have the ability to kind of increase their level of consciousness of what is going on. So that's basically where we're at with AI. It's like a lot of people are very scared about what could happen with AI. Are we going to destroy ourselves? Are we going to, create this like system that rules over all of humanity? And it's like, well, I mean, that is definitely a possibility, but through AI, it's the fastest way that you can learn anything in the world. I mean, you can literally type into AI anything about, any question that you want, and it spits back about 80% of what you need to know about that. And then you should continue to do your research. You shouldn't just take that as the gospel. You got to actually dig in and find a couple real world examples of what AI is kind of telling you. But it's making that process so much simpler. So the human species can get smarter and smarter, learn faster and faster, and really start to embody this intelligence that's going around the world, that's kind of been hidden. And it's been hidden maybe because a lack of technology, maybe because there have been people who have wanted it hidden for whatever reason, whether that's nefarious or, they wanted it hidden because they didn't think humanity was ready for this information. But for whatever reason, it's kind of been in the halls of the secret societies, and now it's really getting out. I mean, if you know where to look, you can find any information about all this stuff that even 50 years ago would have been completely hidden from sight.
Absolutely, yeah, and it might be not be popular opinion because I know a lot of people are afraid of AI, especially maybe in the more spiritual, esoteric world, but I think just as you were talking, it kind of landed for me for the first time that I think it might actually create more independent thinking and more expansion because for so long, we have been, everything that's thrown at us from the media, on the internet, on TV, on the radio is controlled by a few very, particular people or entities or companies. And I've actually been I did this as an experiment because I just want to know more. I've been part of training an AI model, just because I was really curious, like, how is this thing, how does this work? And it's actually it was a beautiful experience helping this technology develop, not consciousness, but you could just see how I think the potential for manipulation is a lot less with AI. I think people might
Mhm.
think it's higher, but I think it's actually a lot less. And as you said, people can start asking any question they want and not be afraid of who's going to judge them, or, it's a safe space for people to start asking questions.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then getting answers that are coming from not just one or two or three human perspectives, but
Hmm.
like the collective perspective of
Yeah,
all of humanity,
exactly.
basically. I mean,
Exactly.
it's taking all of that stuff and kind of putting it together into one usable group of data, basically.
Yeah.
So all the information that all of humanity has ever kind of put together, we put it into this gigantic database, and now we're mining it for information. And each one of these AIs is mining a different way and finding a little bit different perspective, and then they're putting all of those perspectives together, and that's what the general AI would be, is the AI of all the AIs that we're putting together. And again, when you say that, it sounds scary, especially if you have the perspective of AI is separate from, humanity, and it's an us versus them kind of situation, but it could also be a beautiful symbiotic relationship.
Absolutely. That's what I think. Yep.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about your PhD studies, epidemiology, and you were also studying um,
Epigenetics. Yeah. So
epigenetics. Yeah.
yeah. So epidemiology is population medicine. So it's looking at how diseases. I think we probably all know the word epidemiology after COVID because it's how diseases spread in the population. I got into it because I love the idea of being a medical detective and just I love maybe that's why I was interested in this AI model, just like love zooming out and looking at the bigger picture of things and then being able to zoom back in. But through that, epigenetics was a topic that was just emerging as a kind of a buzzword. This is back in like 2007, 2008. It was on the cover of Time magazine. You know, our genes are not our destiny. So my PhD definitely took more of a bent towards the epigenetic side. And at the time, when I got to the end of it with my whole dad thing, I was like, oh my gosh, how did I end up here? What am I going to do with my life? But now, looking back, hindsight's 2020. I can see exactly why I was involved in that research then because it plays so much into what I do now. So epigenetics is this it's the study of how our genes aren't our destiny. So basically, my dad had cancer. That doesn't mean I'm going to get cancer. If your mom had diabetes, it doesn't mean you're going to have diabetes. We're not fated to anything in life. And for so long, we thought, oh, if I have this gene or this mutation, I'm screwed. There's nothing I can do. But epigenetics is how our human body interacts with our environment. So our stress, our food, our toxins, our water, the people around us, everything to turn our genes on and off. So we have so much control and like so much more than we've ever been taught about how our bodies express themselves.
Mhm.
And, it's never too late. And this is why you hear these miraculous stories of people healing from these crazy diseases. Like it's not a fluke. It's honestly never too late. So I just love giving people that hope and that perspective that, even if you've ended up on this health journey for X number of years, there's things that you can do every single day, little tiny things that add up over time to change your life and your disease risk of whatever that may be.
So give us just a very high level perspective. What are some of those things that you can do? What are some of the offerings that you give to clients as far as you've been on this health journey for a while, you're not seeing results. Like, what are some of the larger things that you see that they change and things start to move a little bit faster?
So one of the largest things is removing toxins from our environment. And unfortunately, and I think this is going to be changing too. I think we're on the precipice of, just people waking up to how toxic our world has become in terms of pollution and just chemicals. But um, we all have a toxic load. If you live in a city, there's air pollution, right? The things we put, like, this is what drives me insane is that it's legal in North America. I know Europe's a lot stricter, but women, especially the makeup they put on their face, the body lotion, the perfume, the air fresheners, the fabric softener, it all compounds in our body to create a whole bunch of inflammation and stress. And I find that if people are doing all the right things, like, they're eating clean and whole foods and moving their body and drinking lots of water and sleeping well, like the basics, and things aren't shifting, when we remove those toxins, like the perfumes, especially synthetic chemicals, things shift. So I think a lot of the cancers that we've seen, a lot of the infertility that we're seeing is due to environmental exposures like that. And it's actually we can't clean up all of it because a lot of it is out of our control, but there's a lot that we do have control over, what we can take out, and that helps a lot.
Now, one question I've had listening to basically a couple podcasts on like quantum biology. Did you study at all like quantum biology or anything along those lines?
Not officially, but in my free time, yes. Yes.
Um, so what they're kind of saying is that cancer is typically when a cell stops communicating with the other cells, it now becomes a cancer cell because it's not in communion with the rest of the body, right? Is
Yes.
that there is like pretty much fundamental understanding that's kind of what is happening with that cell. It's essentially shut its ability to communicate with other cells down, and it starts to take on its own life, basically.
Yeah. I mean, we're made up of billions of cells and it's a community, right? Like I'm pointing to myself. I don't know if people can see me, but yeah. And if a cell gets separated from that, they have to fend for themselves. They go on the defense. They start creating their own little ecosystem. So it can get out of control. I don't know if I love Zach Bush, Dr. Zach Bush, and he has some beautiful perspectives on his podcasts about this idea behind cancer. And it makes total sense to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love listening to Zach Bush. He's been on a couple podcasts I've been able to catch, and it's just fascinating to hear that perspective. And again, you talk about like that capital T truth. It's like this resonates so much deeper than any study, any biological
Mhm.
study of what cancer is and how to remediate cancer and anything like that. It's like, no, you've got to have communication within, your cellular structure within your body if you believe that it's gonna all move towards this end goal of the goal being creating a human essentially with that's your cell's goal is to create this functioning human body.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and I think there's a beautiful parallel to what's happening in humanity. This is where we're at right now. Traditionally, we've had a whole bunch of different cells, humans, that are in the superorganism of humanity, and they've all been going in these different directions. They've all, every once in a while, they'll be moving towards the same goal, and then something will happen, they'll splinter. Now they're moving towards different goals. And I think this is the point in humanity where we start to move towards this new goal. And what that takes is communication with the intelligence of the universe, right? It takes that connection to your soul or to God or to the universe or to intuition, whatever that thing is for you. That's what it's going to take to get us all moving towards that same goal. Because from the individual human perspective, I mean, it's so difficult to conceptualize what it would look like for all of us to be moving together. Just like imagine yourself as a lung cell, and you're like, well, what is this thing that I'm in a part of? Like you couldn't even imagine the actual scale of what the human body actually is. And that's what we are as humanity or as single humans in this humanity wide superorganism, or the earth. You could conceptualize it kind of as we're the cellular structure of the earth, basically. And that's where we're at. And we need to all kind of tune in and tap into our intuition to be able to feel where are we moving towards, like, and we don't have to know, okay, like this is the end goal, this is what we need to be doing, but what is my part, where can I play a better role and not just be directed by other people.
Yeah. And I love how just different areas of life, like everything's a mirror for everything else. And sometimes we have to see things in different ways to kind of get the message. But just in parallel and in mirror to what you were saying, I'm learning this first, like as a first time mom. So I have a 15-month-old, a new baby on the way in a few weeks. And I always heard about, you need a village. And we used to have these villages to raise children. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's nice. And it's hard not having a village. And I live in the middle of the biggest city in Canada. And a lot of the time I feel alone and stressed. And like, how am I going to do this? And oh my God, there's a second one coming. And how am I going to work? And how am I going to clean and cook and take care of my family? Going to feel my brain just spiraling. And I don't think it's coincidence that, hundreds of years ago or in villages that still exist on Earth, where, women especially come together to support new mothers.
Mm-hmm.
There's less disease, there's less stress, there's more freedom, there's more peace. And I think that parallels the human body and how it works as well. Like I was just thinking about that. Like I can feel as, isolated from a bigger community of support. It's stressful and like it causes me to go and do things. So if that happens to a cell in the body, it's no wonder that leads to something, a bit more nefarious health-wise.
Right. Yeah. And not that it's like, trying to take down the human body, but it's trying to survive.
It's trying to
Like
survive,
trying
yeah.
to live. It's trying to further propagate itself in a way that the only way that it knows how to at that point from its
Exactly.
standpoint. And then that's where growth at all costs starts to come about. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, I have to make myself as big as possible. I've got to replicate as much as possible so that I can continue this, my lineage, even though it goes against what all the other cells around me are doing. And that's, kind of what we've been doing in humanity for the last,
Yes. Yes.
especially in the business world. I mean, the growth
Yeah.
at all costs business is, I don't want to say it's a cancer, but it's a cancerous idea that
It's
you
not
have to,
sustainable
it's
at the very least,
unsustainable.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we've seen, we're bumping up against the limits of its sustainability. We're bumping up against the limits of what is possible when you just set your only goal in business as grow 10% every single year, regardless of what the outcome is. It's like you have to continue growing. And, I certainly understand how we got here and why we got here. And there's so many different ideas about, the fractional reserve banking system and what role that plays in this growth at all costs, and whether that was done out of just, malice or an unknowing of what would come about of that system. But regardless, we have to rethink how we're doing everything. We have to like really put in the thought and start taking the steps. And what's beautiful is that there are these counter systems that are being built. This kind of quantum banking system that's starting to make a pretty big movement, and we're starting to see even the largest companies in the world, even the BlackRocks and Fidelities, they are starting to really see, okay, this quantum banking program is a viable option for the future. And they're starting to put, I think it was BlackRock was the first one, and then Vanguard, Fidelity, they all kind of fell in line as far as getting into crypto ETFs
Mhm.
and really getting into that world. So it's fascinating to see. And I love, it gives me hope that these superstructures that everybody tries to vilify and say like that, this is the reason that everything is wrong, that they're actually like putting interest in and trying to see, okay, what is that? And guys like Larry Fink, I mean, he's completely 180'd. In 2017, 18, he was saying that cryptocurrency was a joke basically, and now he's betting 1 to 2% of the several trillion dollars that they manage on this system. So
That's very cool.
I
Yeah.
love to see all of that happening.
I've actually never heard the term quantum banking, so I'm gonna go have to look that up after. But I think it's just another example, a beautiful example of how there's probably gonna be a lot of fear in the collective in the next, at least starting this year into the next few years because of what we're being fed in the traditional media. But there's
Right.
so much going on behind the scenes that
Yeah.
is already being built. And if you can kind of just, I don't want to say isolate yourself from the fear, but just learn to be able to hold it and understand that it's all happening for us and beautiful things are transitioning, there's nothing to be afraid of.
Yeah, I was really feeling into that this morning in my meditation, and I did a really cool. It was basically like aligning to your highest timeline with somebody who I had on the show earlier, Magix, and she was basically like aligning us to our highest timeline and kind of breaking it down. And that is it kind of dawned on me this morning. It's like, well, your highest timeline could be just a 2-degree shift, or if you're on like that old trajectory, I mean, you have to do a full 180. And that's where that fear comes in. That's where that scary aspect is when you have to really make gigantic changes, especially in a very short amount of time, which is what we're going to have to do. So the sooner you can start moving your trajectory away from like that old belief system, that old world where we're going to, and slowly start creeping it maybe just 1% at a time every couple of weeks, like learn something new, try something out, get a little different perspective on what is really happening. That fear starts to shed. You don't have to go through that dark night of the soul that you typically go through when you're on this timeline and all of a sudden everything in your world has changed, like probably what happened at the end of your PhD and everything happening in that timeline. It's like, oh shoot, like everything I thought that I was moving towards is now not where I need to be moving towards, and
Yeah.
that is a scary place to be.
Yeah, I've had many dark nights of the soul. I also went through divorce after naturopathic school, and it was, very like loving and conscious, but still rocked me for a couple years. Like, what am I doing? Is this the right thing? So I do feel like we're shifting into timelines. Everyone is, where maybe we don't have to go into the depths of those huge decisions and pain because, again, people have gone before us to do the work to kind of speed things up a little bit. So people will realize things maybe a little bit faster and not have to experience those. Not that there's anything wrong with going there. I think we have to as humans as well. But yeah,
I think you sign up for it before
you
you
sign
come
up for
here.
it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like, how do you want to experience this shift in consciousness? Do you want to be that first one in 1978 that makes this gigantic conscious leap, and then you're like the only one on the planet with this perspective, and that's, just dark night after the soul after dark night after the soul? Or do you want to be the one that, they have an awakening in 2012 or 2020, and it's like, oh, you know, this is scary, but there's also thousands and thousands of other people that have gone through it, that are putting out information, that are on that path, and they're sharing it with me. So it's fascinating to kind of see where we all fall. And for those that are remaining on that old path, that are clinging to that old reality that we were heading towards, they've designed it that way too. Like, they're going to experience one of the biggest dark nights of the soul that their soul may ever experience. In, again, it's not too often that an entire planet goes through a shift in consciousness in one generation of
Generation. Yeah.
humans. Like, that doesn't happen very often in the universe or the galaxy, or however far you can conceptualize out. Again, you and I knowing that there is life elsewhere in the universe, in the galaxy, maybe even in the solar system, at least at some point in the very recent history. So, um, again, this is kind of where we're at with this evolution in consciousness. Like, we've all signed up. We're all old souls. We're all here. We've experienced some crazy stuff in the lineage of our soul path. So we all have the gifts. We all have the abilities to go through this shift in consciousness. We wouldn't have come here if we didn't know that we were capable of doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the lessons I learned, I was in school for a very long time. I added up the years once. It was a long time. But basically, nothing I learned at school is what's gotten me to this moment in time. you know? So I think that's kind of ironic too, is like we have to have these conversations with each other, as humanity, as a collective, because we don't learn in school what we quote unquote need to know to navigate these times, right?
Exactly. What we're learning in school is what worked 40 or 50 or 70 or 1,000 years ago. It's the same thing with the dogmatic practices of religion. It's like, yes, in Christianity, that worked in the 14th century, when we were a completely different society, a completely different scope, scale, level. Like, everything was different in those times. So if you don't adapt, if your system isn't adapting to the changing of, every single generation coming through, well, then it's going to be dead wood. It's going to be that old dead wood that either collapses on under its own weight, or is burned down when a bolt of lightning hits it. And those are the two options that you have if you're not evolving with the natural evolution of, nature.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's alarming to me, just as someone who, so I'm not really in clinical practice anymore, but when I was, the number of children being diagnosed with ADHD and learning disabilities, and, as a parent now and seeing my friends who have children struggling in the school system that was designed, for the Industrial Revolution to train children
Right.
to sit in class. And I want to say, like, what if there's nothing wrong with your child? What if, they just need to run outside and feel the sun and like scream, But I think we're getting there with conversation around that. I know it's a hot topic right now, but that's one thing I think about a lot lately, is just how to change the school system. And, you know, I know nature schools are popping up, and, a lot more people, especially after COVID, are homeschooling and have these pods and stuff. But I think there's just so much hope for the next generation if we can help children learn, this is an emotion. It's okay to feel. It's okay to cry. You know, get curious, ask questions. Don't just sit there and memorize this textbook.
Yeah. And I talk to a lot of, especially early education teachers, that are bringing that into the classroom. They're bringing in yoga,
Love
mindfulness
it. Love it.
practices,
Yeah.
talking about their emotions at 4, 5, 6, 7 years old. And it's like, well, that's perfect. Like that's exactly when they need to be learning about this stuff. So it is cool to see that the system is kind of shifting and the people that are in the system are also shifting their perspective.
Yeah.
So
They're taking an active role in shifting it. Yeah.
exactly. And that's what this younger generation, that's what the young millennials and the generation the Gen Zers, they're not waiting for somebody to do the work for them. They are actually going out and getting it done. They're taking care of it. They know what they're here to experience. And again, you could conceptualize this on like a higher dimensional plane, is that all of these souls that are coming in have that ability. They are already connected to their true essence, why they're here, what they're meant to do. They don't have to go out and figure it out over 30 or 40 or 50 years until they figure out, oh, this is what I'm here to do, because there's the belief and there's the energetic the higher energy on the planet that has them connected back to their source, to their energy, to their soul. So they already know what they need to do, and they're not waiting. They're not being indoctrinated into a system that doesn't allow them to do that. For at least for me, it took me 33 years to
Yeah.
figure out, to even start on the path of figuring it out, and then it's taken me another 3 years since then to really understand what it is that I'm here to do and why I'm here, and what are my gifts, what are my skills, and kind of understand it from a higher level perspective. So it's awesome to see that these younger kids, and that's what, for you and I mean, we should be kind of almost looking towards those kids to find what are the answers. Like what have you come here to share? I see it all the time on social media. You've got these like 6, 7, 8 year olds that are just espousing the deepest wisdom that
Wisdom.
I've
Yeah.
ever heard. It's like, okay, yes, let's go. Like let's
Tell
get
me more.
those
Tell me
kids.
more. Yeah.
Yeah, let's get those kids in front of a television screen. Let's run them for the presidency. Like, forget about these octogenarians that were running
Yes.
for president. It doesn't make any sense. So yeah, I'm very hopeful for the future of humanity. But I did want to get to a little bit about, you talk a lot about essentially aligning the mind, body, and spirit. I think that's a lot of what your work is. So I kind of want to get into a little bit about that as well before we kind of wrap this up. So tell us, what is your perspective on the alignment of mind, body, and spirit, and how that all plays into a healthy human being?
Yes. So as you said, I think it's going to be a lot different for the next generation if they're being quote unquote conditioned in different ways. But I think like at least so I'm 41. My generation um, was conditioned to keep it very separate, right? Like you're in school, you're there for your mind, don't cry, do your work, be good.
Hmm.
And it's, all of our systems were like that. So health as well. Like I was lucky growing up that I was never seriously ill, but my mom was a nurse. And, I never heard her talk about the mind, body, spirit. It was all, people are sick, I get them better. It was all about the body. So I really think that we can't have true health if you're not acknowledging your mind, body, and spirit. And I would have, maybe 10 years ago argued that it could just be the body and the mind. But I had this weird relationship with spirit. I was raised Catholic, kind of stepped back from the Catholic Church and really kind of had to find God again in my own way, and lean into that divine wisdom again. But that guides everything. And if we can't align that to our body and our mind, I think a lot of the messages get lost. And yeah, I could
Yeah.
it's kind of it's a really like random abstract conversation.
Well, that's what we're here to do.
Yeah.
Like, let's get into it. I definitely agree with you that we've almost compartmentalized our spiritual aspect. And for a
Yes.
lot of people, it's, Sunday at 10:30, that was their spiritual aspect. And then at 11:30, it was mind and body. And usually it was just either mind or either body. A lot of people really picked one or the other. You went into, the academia, but you completely forgot about your human body, or you went into some type of, work that required your body, and you kind of left the mind separate from that. It was just, I go do this, I get done, and then maybe I work a little bit on my mind or my um, a little bit about your spirituality. But I think we're at the point where we can essentially combine all of those. And that's, bringing a little bit of spirituality into all of the aspects that we're dealing with on a daily life. So work, you know, school systems, government systems. It's like, well, yeah, I mean, the wisdom of these religions and philosophies, I mean, it's all there. Like all that intelligence is there. We've removed it from all the other aspects of our lives. And it's like, well, it can't work that way. It's just like removing a cell from, communicating with the rest of the body. It becomes a cancerous cell.
Yeah.
So
And that's why they don't get better. Yeah. One of the things that kind of brought me back to spirituality was, I don't know if you're familiar with Cryon. Do you know Cryon?
yeah.
Okay. So I was reading the work of Cryon. So Cryon, I think it is an entity that is channeled through a human, and you can read the channels. So I was reading the channels, and then Jesus came up in the conversation, and I was still at that point where I was kind of like, oh, just because not about Jesus and God, but I had just had this I had to untangle myself from the church, as I said.
Mhm.
But he just talked about Jesus was human, but what made him so miraculous and what made him, the example that he was setting was what's possible when our DNA is activated from every dimension. And, that caught my attention as someone that had studied epigenetics. And I was like, like what if we have this epigenetic potential to like unlock a lot of the DNA? So we have something in DNA called junk DNA. Like scientists have literally called it junk DNA because they don't know what it does. And it's like 97% of our DNA. And that never sat right with me. And I always thought to myself, it has to do something. Like 97% of our DNA cannot just be there. Oh, it's just there. Like, it's just,
Could you imagine like your cells taking all that energy to replicate 97% of the DNA that didn't mean anything? Like it just doesn't make sense from a biological standpoint.
Exactly. So what Cryon was saying was basically what happens is as we remember what we're here to do, where we've come from, as we expand, we activate more of this junk DNA, quote unquote junk. And that's what Jesus had the capability of doing. Like he had activated a lot, like so much of his DNA that he had this capacity to perform miracles. And what did it was the energy of love. So that brought me back to like the whole point of spirituality is love. And like, can we love each other? Can we love the world? Can we love our journey? And that was just a really grounding, peaceful realization for me.
Yeah, love is definitely, from my perspective, it's the glue that holds everything together. So whether it's the communication at a cellular level, a communication at the human level, a communication from as we become a multi solar species, like we'll be communicating with other beings in the universe or in the galaxy to start. And, that love is what shows us and glues us together. It's the binding force that brings us back together. Whereas, typically hate or separation is what tears us apart. And that's the whole idea. Ken Wilber talks about this in Spiral Dynamics that, essentially every time you take a spiral up, you become a bigger part or another part of something bigger than yourself that you thought you were before. So every spiral that you go up, it's not that you're learning new lessons. You're just learning lessons from a higher perspective, from understanding that you're more than just, a cell. You're more than just an organ. You're more than just a human being. You're actually a spiritual being having a human interaction. And as you continue to spiral up and up and up, that your understanding starts to unlock all of these. Again, there's a lot of third dimensional DNA that it unlocks as well, but there's multi dimensions of your DNA. Your soul has DNA. Your spirit has DNA. The archangelic beings have DNA. When you get up into, even the highest levels like that, there's 12th dimensional, 13th dimensional DNA that you're starting to unlock and experience. And again, if this doesn't make any sense to you, it's very difficult to conceptualize from the human mind.
Yeah.
You have to really escape from the human mind and get into a higher perspective. But
I think that's actually what the book was called, the Cryon book. I think it was called like the 12 levels of DNA or something like that.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, as you just said, like tying it back to the mind, body, spirit, I think that's exactly, I think it's natural for people when they kind of make this realization that, okay, I'm more than just my mind, but now I have to figure out how do I get there? And that was my journey. I outsourced a lot of my power. Like, okay, this astrologer will tell me, this practitioner will tell me, this coach will help me. And I was just trying to figure it out without understanding that, emotions are stored in our body and I can do whatever I want with my mind. But if I don't, learn how to release those, nothing I do with my mind will bring me into alignment. And if I don't appreciate the magic of being human and, the levels of our DNA and that we're guided by this divine force who loves me, even if I'm being super hard on myself, I'm never going to be in alignment. So that's where I think the balance of the mind, body, spirit awareness comes in.
Yeah, yeah, that's beautifully well said. I think that kind of sums up the whole idea of really truly aligning those. And what are some steps that you have people take to truly align that, to really line up their mind, body, spirit?
I think it's just helping them at first understand that you can't force it, and
Mm.
that defeats the whole purpose. People will hire me as a coach or come expecting to be fixed. And that was my whole thing about stepping out of clinical practice, was that I don't want to be your guru. I'm not here to fix you. I believe that I have the power to hold space for you, to have a safe environment, to explore all of these things. And I can bring my experience and my knowledge and my wisdom into it to guide the process. But I really want people to understand that the power lies within themselves. And that's the magic that a lot of us have to remember and wake up to. But the first step would just be learning that you can change your mind. As you said, the children of today don't have that conditioning. Like, they just spew it off. But, it took me 30 years, it took you 33 years to realize, like, wait a second, I don't have to believe that, even though I've
Yeah.
believed it my whole life. So just how that's big for people. Like, that's been a big journey with my mom. I'm really proud of my mom, actually. I don't think she'll ever get to the place. Oh, I shouldn't say that. I'm not going to say that.
She has the potential
She
to
has the
get there.
potential. She hasn't shown excessive interest, shall we say, in like learning about quantum banking, for example. But I have to give her credit in that she's been very receptive to observing me and just seeing how I've shifted my whole life. And I know that she was scared for me too. Like, she tried to talk me out of my divorce. She tried to talk me out of, why rock the boat, Laura? Everything's fine. And I was like, Mom, I'm not okay with being fine. And I'm going to show you, like, we can expand ourselves. So she's been very receptive to, oh, wait a second. Okay. And anyway, but it rocks people's boats that, I can change my mind. I can think new thoughts. So just helping people understand that you have to start there, just being open to
Mhm.
that idea. And then reconnecting with nature. Like, so many of us spend so much time inside now and at our computers. But again, which technology is not a problem, doesn't have to be a problem, but our human bodies were designed to evolve with nature. And you have to fuel with nature, like sun in your eyes in the morning, grounding your feet on the earth, you know, smell. I have a whole bunch of essential oils behind me, like smelling pure essential oils is the quickest way to kind of calm your whole nervous system. So
Mhm.
getting back to the basics, not sexy. I don't believe in biohacking. I believe we're beyond biohacking. Like, why do we want to hack? We don't have to hack anything. Like,
Right.
we're whole. We have to remember how to do to just exist on this earth plane. So I kind of roll my eyes when I hear people talking about biohacking. And I'm like, it's just not, again, it's not sustainable.
It's a very mind-led approach
Yes.
to a holistic,
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah. Like, let's not hack anything. Let's create sustainable shifts that, expand you to be here the rest of your life.
Yeah, and this is where I love the kind of solar punk movement, which
Mm.
is essentially they believe that technology and nature can coexist in a very harmonious way. We can design all of society to be able to a use all of the technology that we've adapted, plus any, the technology is only speeding up as far as the advancement of the technology. So continuing to use that, but in a way that also aligns with the natural progression of the universe. And that's kind of the solar punk perspective, is that that's where we're moving. So there's a couple other offshoots of solar punk. There's like lunar punk, which is like essentially everything has to go underground. Technology is going to take over, and we're going to have to hide from that technology that we've created. They're in the same boat as the technological butterfly people, who believe that humanity is essentially the larvae for this technology that we're creating. And when we create this final technology, it just kind of does away with the old system, and it becomes the new conscious technology. I have a problem with that. I don't think you can have a necessarily like a non-carbon based being that is also connected to the intelligence of the universe. I think that kind of goes against the idea of like a natural evolution. So that's just my perspective. That's what I get when I really
Yeah,
delve into that.
that
But
lands as truth for me too. I'm just thinking
yeah,
these are like I'm like all these new phrases I need to go look up after. Um, what was I gonna say? Oh my gosh, my mind just went blank. It'll come to me.
but yeah, that's kind of like that's what I align with the idea of like the solar punk movement, and that we
Yeah,
can create this harmonious existence between technology
yeah,
and between nature, and humans can still do all the things that they normally did. Also, they don't have to do it. You don't have to be on the savannah plain for 40 hours a day or 40 hours a week looking for food. Like you
absolutely.
can, we can create food. We can build a society that doesn't have to do that. We can focus more on, again, I think where humanity is moving towards is becoming kind of the stewards of this balanced approach between physicality and spirituality,
Mhm.
and stewarding that across the galaxy, the closer galaxies, maybe the entirety of the universe. Again, as you start to really delve into what your teacher was calling these Syrian beings, essentially what all they are us in the future. It's just a future version of ourselves that is coming back into this timeline, into this time and space to guide and show and share and kind of shape the way that humanity evolves. So essentially it's just us coming back. And I conceptualized this a couple weeks ago where I was doing a practice where I was going back and I was leaning into an experience of when the first time that I felt separate from myself. And it was back when I was like 2 years old. And I went back when I was 2 years old and I consoled myself in that moment, like in the memory of myself. I was in that space. And that changed the trajectory of who I was from then on. So essentially, that's what these beings are doing. They're coming back to an old version of themselves, an old energy that is still themselves, but it's just in a different timeline, and they're helping, they're guiding, they're sharing, they're communing with us. They're sharing with us again these new ways of how can we be healthy? How can we align mind, body, soul? How can we build a better governmental system, a better business system, a better financial system, like all of these different things. It's not that we're creating all of these new things from out of nowhere. Like we're literally tapping into the intelligence of the universe to bring them into this realm. So
Yeah.
it's just a part of the process. Like we're always just basically going back in time to help guide the previous versions of ourselves, and by helping heal those wounds from our previous selves, we improve our current self. And that is what is happening right now. There's all these beings that are improving us. They're pouring into us all of this information to improve their future reality, when in reality everything is happening all at the same time. There
Yes.
is no
That's
such
the
thing
mind.
as
It's like,
time
what?
and space. Yeah.
Yeah, I love just when I woke up to the idea that there's these Syrian guides, Pleiadian guides, and they're just waiting to be asked. Like they won't ever, I've been told they won't ever just kind of impose themselves on you, but if you ask for their guidance and their
Hmm.
support, they'll be there. And I can't remember where I heard this or read this, but like the fall of Atlantis, I love learning about Lemuria and Atlantis. And I've read that the fall of Atlantis was because of their relationship with technology, and it just like
Right.
collapsed everything. And now we're in this real opportunity to redefine our relationship with technology, to not repeat that. Um, and maybe that's what they're helping us do right now. And I love that idea of the solar. What did you call it?
Solar punk.
Solar punk. Yeah, solar punk. Yeah.
Yeah. It'll be an interesting time for humanity. And I think again, from my perspective, the belief in the future that you think is going to happen is what manifests in your reality. So if you have these very limited beliefs, that's the only thing that can manifest in your reality. If you have these expanded beliefs, then a lot more is possible. It's not just A or B that could happen. It's A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Like all of these possibilities kind of come into perspective. So
Mhm.
the more you can expand your understanding, the more you can expand your consciousness, the better the outcomes that are possible can manifest into your reality.
And not just our personal reality. But this is one thing I've had to really lean into is for several years, I was really focused on my reality, and I struggled with, and I don't know if this is your journey too, but when bad stuff happens in the world, like how do I be there for that while still believing that, I create my reality? So the
Right.
whole situation right now in the Middle East, I'm like, it's really perplexing. And, how do I in good conscience focus on my reality and creating abundance this year when all that's going on? And I just, what I lean into is, you can show up and advocate for that. And I think if you believe in it, you should, but just don't underestimate the power of the human collective. And if we're all just open to the idea that we do create our reality and we combine those forces, things shift in
Right.
like maybe a butterfly effect way. And I just think people kind of fall into to despair and hopelessness and like, oh, what's the point? And I think you can have both. And that's part of what I love helping people understand as well, is like, how do I hold everything about being human? Because it's good and it's bad. It's not always going to be good. I totally
Exactly.
believe we create our reality and like I want it to be good, but I also think that's just not life on earth. And
Right.
how do we move forward and hold that at the same time?
Exactly. Yeah. You exist in a collective reality. Like you can't deny that you're not existing in this collective reality, but you get to choose what you put your energy into.
Exactly. Yes.
You can have awareness of everything else that's going on, but as long as you're not sending energy to that, whether that's, hate or love, it's kind of tricky. Like you have to find that balance, because when you send that lower density, when you send hate over towards another person because they attacked somebody else or something like that, you're adding fuel to the fire.
Mhm.
If you can send love to both sides, love to the people who are hurt, love to the people who also are perpetrating that thing, then that is kind of, again, love is the answer. I mean,
Yeah.
it just fundamentally is. So, yeah, it is. It's hard. There's really no other words to share besides love is the
Yeah.
answer.
It's
I
the
mean,
mantra for 2024. That's it.
yeah, beautiful. Well, Laura, this has been a wonderful conversation. I've truly enjoyed everything that we got into, all the talking points. I'm glad that I could share a little bit of information with you. Hopefully, you can get some research into some of the fun topics that we went through. Um, for anybody that is looking to get in contact with you, that is looking to work with you, what's the best place to send them?
I love hanging out on Instagram as my social media platform, so of choice. So that's Dr. Laura Hughes. So Dr. like my name. And then my website's just drlaurahughes.com. And I love just having conversation with people. So feel free just to say hi via my contact form or say hi on Instagram. And yeah, I'm here for it.
Beautiful. Awesome. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I'm glad we could do this in the new year, and I wish you a wonderful, prosperous 2024, as well as best of luck with the second child on the way.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Have a good one.
Thank you again for listening to Changing the Channel with Joe Garner. If you enjoyed the show, please follow the podcast, hit the bell to know when a new show comes out, share with a friend, and rate us on whatever platform you're tuning in from. It helps get these messages out to more people to create the collective shift in reality we are here to experience. Make sure you interact with the Q&A and poll sections of the show so I can continue to provide content you enjoy. Finally, check out my website in the show notes to become a VIP of Changing the Channel and join the shift that is happening.